All right. So welcome again, guys. I just hit record. So welcome again. And as I was saying, in one of the previous discussions, we had covered what were the different types of investment sectors, right? And a breakdown of the different sectors. So you have your cyclical investments, your sensitive investments, and your defensive investments, right? Each of them will act differently, especially depending on the nature of the market and the nature of the economy, right? Now, underneath each of those, like cyclicals, you see it's basic materials, consumer cyclicals, financial services, real estate. As I said in the previous discussion, we broke down even what type of companies would fall underneath those. So this is just an example of what you would work up for yourself, right? So when you're investing, it's not a matter of just going ahead. It's not a matter of just going ahead and looking to see what are the hot names that they're talking about and those things. They're always going to be hot names. The, today's Apple, tomorrow's Amazon, the next day's BlackBerry, the next day's Nokia. That doesn't mean that you're going to invest into everyone, right? So what is it? You need to go ahead and structure your portfolio accordingly. So for this, I went ahead and I used the Morningstar average benchmark. So it's based off of the recommendation of Morningstar. Now, those who don't know Morningstar, Morningstar is essentially a US based investment site that goes ahead and analyzes various stocks and mutual funds and all of those things. And so they came up with their benchmark on how an average portfolio should be spread. So under the section where you see benchmark, that's straight from there. Where you see portfolio, that is your portfolio. Okay, that is going to be the information, the allocation of your funds and how it spreads through the various shares in your portfolio, right? So, and then all I did was pop in a variance. Why I put in a variance? So that way you can quickly look and see which sectors have you gone really heavy on, which sectors have you not touched at all, which sectors that for the time being you don't need to look at anymore because you're covered in those sectors, right? And so, for example, in this case, when you look at cyclical, the main thing that sticks out is that there's no real estate. There's no real estate investment in there. So a person now who has this investment portfolio, the moment that they look at this, they know, okay, I'm no longer looking at financial services. I'm no longer looking at consumer cyclicals. I'm now going ahead and looking more at real estate stocks. When you look down underneath sensitive, there's no energy. So when you're going ahead and looking to build up your sensitive, you would look at energy. For defense, you would look at utilities, right? Now, another way of using this tool is when it comes time to reallocate. So for example, if you're reallocating your cyclicals, you will see that you are running a little bit heavy on the consumer cyclicals and a little bit light on the basic materials. So if you're looking to go ahead and sell and do some reallocation, a thought that you may have is to move some from the consumer cyclical over to the basic materials. So I just wanted to quickly just show you that when you put this together and how you can use this to analyze your own portfolio. All right. Now, so now we will go into what I was going to initially present today. And that is, drum roll please, renting slash leasing versus buying, right? No, this is a topic that is covered almost everywhere, right? And we're not talking from the business aspect as whether or not to buy an asset versus leasing an asset, although it has a lot of similarities, right? You almost have to look at it from the business aspect. But from a personal aspect as well, it also has a lot of psychology behind, right? So when you're renting, okay, so when you're buying a home, right? That is one of the most joyous moments. And that is essentially you now stepping into being an adult because you now own your own home, right? Now, why did this thought process actually even come into where in order for you to get this big pride, you have to own a home? Well, a lot of it is coming from way back, right? One of the things you have to think about is back in the day, many stock markets either did not exist or were just in their infancy. So not many people were thinking, oh, let me go ahead and invest and go buy some shares, right? What was popular would be bonds, right? They would go ahead, buy bonds, hold on to their bonds. But this whole, you definitely know there was no crypto. Nobody was doing any trading. And shares, even if shares were around, it wasn't that the whole volatility where you can really make money doing that, right? So how would you go ahead and have an asset that had some true value and will go increase in value over time? You buy a home, right? You go ahead, buy a home. That will be your greatest asset, right? The other thing is owning a home came with a lot of prestige. When you went ahead and you owned a home, there was a sense of pride and all that to say that this is mine, right? So you had that aspect. You also in you also in not some cases, you also had a racial aspect to it as well, right? So for example, in the US, back in the 60s or 70s, houses in the suburbs were subsidized at a much lower cost only to white purchasers. And Blacks were not allowed by law to be able to take advantage of that, right? So when Blacks now had the ability to now purchase a home, that now became something that they held with great honor, right? And born the American dream, owning a home. Here in Jamaica, one of the fun facts that talking with my aunt found out, one of the things is even in today's designs of homes, you will see Georgian architecture. Yeah, yeah. Georgian architecture. That's actually coming from the great house on the plantation. Because once again, those living in the great house was seen was something to aspire for, saying, oh, I want a house like that. And so to this day, so many years after slavery, a lot of homes are actually designed still with a lot of the elements of the great houses back in the day. So owning a home really comes with a lot of psychological behind it. But outside of the psychological, what we need to look at is the financial aspect of it, right? And does it still make as much sense today as it did back then? Okay. All right. So, as I said, for many years, owning a home, owning your vehicle, and all that was essentially seen the only way to go, right? If you weren't owning it, then what? You're an idiot, right? Why you don't buy your home, right? You always hear renting, you're just throwing away your money, right? People always say that, oh, renting, throwing away the money, or you're just making the landlord rich, right? But in recent times, especially among the younger generations, that viewpoint is starting to change a bit, right? And renting is no longer being frowned upon as how it once was, right? So, for example, even how they would say it back in the day, if you were renting, you kind of said it underneath your breath. They say, "Oh, where you live?" And you say, "Oh, I'm renting," right? No, you'll be like, "Oh, I'm renting that place," right? No shame in your game. Over time, that has changed, right? And now renting in some cases is actually shows that you have money. Back in the day, it was the owning of the home, right? Or I have my house up in the suburbs, or I'm good, right? Now it is, oh, I'm renting that 2 bedroom right at that sky high rise down there. And so, so I mean, that is now starting to change as well, as to where you can be renting and it will still be seen as kind of a prestige, like, wow, you can actually rent there. So, so that is how things have changed. Now, is renting really a waste of money? Well, for years, as I said, people are always saying, if you're renting, you're throwing away your money. You have instances where fathers wouldn't let the daughter leave because they say, oh, but I don't want you to go and give nobody your money. You don't need to go anywhere until you purchase a home, right? Now, the other thing is it doesn't factor into your net worth. It's an expense. You don't own where you don't own that dwelling, whether it's an apartment or a house, right? You don't own it. So when you're calculating your net worth, we spoke about net worth last week. Rent is not include your the rental property is not included in your net worth. It's part of the net worth of the landlord, but not you. It's an expense to you, right? The other thing is, especially like for instance, if you're renting some of these townhomes or some of these apartments, they'll go ahead and say the rent is X amount. And then when you go in, they say, oh, you also have to pay maintenance. And you're like, what? And they're like, yeah, maintenance is going to be X amount. And then all of a sudden you're like, I didn't know this. I can't afford this place, right? So renting also comes with that. And then also bear in mind that renting does carry, the rent that you pay also carries a little top up for the landlord. So if the landlord is paying $50, you're going to pay $80, right? So a lot of people go ahead and say that's why it's a waste of money, right? Now, you'll see last week when I put up the diagram on how to calculate net worth, I had put, I believe it was 2 asterisks, 1 or 2 asterisks beside rent. The reason for that is, in my opinion, I feel that rent is a waste of money if you're not doing anything else, right? If you have no savings, you have no investments, you have no pension plan, you don't have a 401k, you don't have anything else to show for your name, and you're renting, then okay, that's stupid tax, right? Remember we talked about stupid tax? That's definitely stupid tax, right? So if you're going ahead and you're paying rent, have something else that you can call an asset, because you cannot call that rental property an asset, okay? Ownership, right? Owning your home, of course, carries a lot of benefits, right? One, it's yours. You have no landlord. There are instances whereby people would be renting and they decide they want to move back inside the home that they were renting. Boom, they kick you out. You have no say. You're out, right? They go ahead, they hike up the rent the next month. You can't afford it. Boom, you're out. They come inside your place and they inspect it and they say, oh, I don't like how you keep in your place. Boom, they're out, right? If you own your own home, there is nobody to kick you out. No, you will see where I put in brackets. If you have paid off your mortgage. Remember, when we were covering net worth, you have your asset, which is you have your asset and you have your liability, right? Your home is only 100% yours until you've paid off that bank, right? But if you want to test my theory, for the next 3 to 6 months, don't pay that mortgage, right? Just try it. Just try it, and tell me how that works out for you, okay? Now, if you've paid off your home, then that is free and clear. That is all 100% yours. The next thing is you have the freedom to change it as you please. When you're renting, you can't just go ahead and say, oh, I'm going to add on another room. You can't go ahead and say, oh, I'm going to chop down all those trees. I don't like all those trees. There are things that you cannot do when you're renting, right? Now, if you own your home, you can do whatever you please. You want to go ahead and knock down a wall because you think that it will create more open space. Do it. It's your home. You can do as you please, right? So that's another benefit. The next thing I want to talk about is that it promotes generational wealth. This once again is coming from how it was back in the day, right? So back in the day, your main assets was essentially your land and your home, right? Now, your home, in many instances, once you've passed, that home would go down to the next generation, right? And that next generation, if they choose to live in it, they're living in a home that's free and clear, no mortgage to pay. And mind you, they're still working, they have their savings and all that, and they don't have any mortgage to pay. On the other hand, they can also sell it. It's now free and clear. They sell it, and all of that money is now profit to them, right? So it promotes generational wealth in that regard, right? As I had mentioned about the homes in the suburbs back in the 70s, well, a lot of those kids went to college without having to take out any student loan, right? Because the parents were able to refinance the home. And by that time, it had a lot of equity in it. And they were able to send their kids to a lot more, to the more expensive and prestigious colleges, right? Now, we know back in those days, it was really part of the old good old boy clique, right? And so it was really the connections that you made in those colleges and those things that really helped you after college into the working world. Well, if you had student loans to think about, even though you had the grades, you had the smarts, you had what it took to go to these prestigious schools, you couldn't afford it. And so you would have to settle for you're going to a community college, you're going to a different type of college. And so many of those opportunities just wasn't afforded to you. So that's another way how it promotes generational wealth, right? Another thing is that it grows over time, right? I mean, minus the financial collapse of the last housing bubble. But if you look at a house and let's say somebody bought it in the 1960s, and you look at the value of that house now, wow, fantastic. Why? Time value of money, right? So unless something really bad happens that drops the value of your home, your house will go up in value over time. Okay, so that is really the benefits of ownership. Now, what are the benefits of renting? Right? Are they still stupid? Well, one of the things is your problems are for the landlord to solve. Okay, a roof is leaking, landlord problem. Your hot water heater broken, landlord problem. there's a crack in the wall, landlord problem, right? None of that is your problem. If you own the home, that would be your problem. But since you're renting, that's not your problem. So outside of your rent, and yes, you'll go ahead and do a little gardening and those things. But the heavier repairs and maintenance that needs to be done to the house is the landlord that pays for it, not you, right? And so you're able to escape that cost. You also have the ability to be what I call a free spirit, right? So let us say you're living in Kingston now. You're living close to your current job. That's all fine and dandy. There's a job opportunity out in Montego Bay, and you say, oh, I would want to go there. Well, you're renting. You can just up and leave, right? If you own your own home, there's a little bit more to think about in that regard. One, are you going to commute that far? Two, are you going to go ahead and put your house up for rent? Three, are you going to go ahead and sell your house? How long is it going to take to sell? How long is it going to take to rent? And remember, you're on the hook for the mortgage payments all that time. So to just up and just go somewhere when you own a home is a bit more difficult, right? Then you save the money saved, because a lot of times renting can actually work out cheaper. Remember, you're not paying for the major repairs. And in some cases, the rent for the place that you're staying can actually be cheaper than if you were to buy the whole place outright, right? So that money that you're saving, that should go into investments. Remember, you're trying not to turn rent into stupid tax. So if you are saving money from renting, then put that to something else. Remember, rental property for you is not an asset. So you have to work and develop your own assets. Okay? There we go. All right. So to sum up, renting versus buying. Buying a home is no longer the catch-all dream, right? It is no longer the right to being an adult. You have to have a home, right? You have to not have a home. Yes, you should have a home. You don't have to own a house. It's a better way of saying that. Yeah, you don't have to own a house, right? You can go ahead and rent, and in many cases that stigma is starting to go away, right? If you're renting, be sure to have other long-term investments. The person who bought their home after 15 or 30 years, that house is now a 100% asset to them. So they now won't have that liability. They will have that asset, and their net worth will instantly shoot up. So if you are not buying a home, you need to make sure that you have other plans to build up your assets over time, right? So, I mean, so when that guy goes ahead and say, oh, I own my house, it costs X amount, you can say, oh, that's fantastic. I have the same amount inside my investments. Then that wasn't stupid tax you've been paying all these years. But if you look at him and say, oh, well, I don't even have anything in the bank account, you're stupid. You've been paying stupid tax for years. All right. So try and build your own assets on outside of, well, try and build your own assets, not outside of, because as I said, rental property is not an asset to the renter. So you need to build your own assets. All right. Cannot stress that enough, right? The other thing is live based off of your needs and wants, right? Johnny down the street going to tell you, oh, you need to go ahead and buy a house up in Norbrook, right? So you go ahead, you buy your house up in Norbrook, you can't afford anything else and all that. Johnny out there living the life because he paying some little rent, but in another city, right? So don't watch what anybody else is saying. Don't watch what anybody else is doing. Don't follow, don't just arbitrarily follow other people's advice, right? Do your own research, and at the end of the day, it's you that have to live, right? So make sure that you take that into consideration. All right. So I believe that is it. Yes. So I know I I covered a topic. It's kind of a hot topic. I am sure you guys all have your own thoughts and views. I know there are some of you that's probably saying, "Oh, Warren, you're an idiot. The only way to go is buying a home." Another person will be like, "Oh, I'm so glad you said this because I always said you don't need to buy a home." So I will be sure to post this up by this weekend. I am sure all of you guys are subscribed and have that notification bell on. So when this video comes up, I am more than interested to see you guys' comments. All right. So I want all of you guys to stay safe. We are under even longer lockdowns. So stay safe, keep your sanity, and we'll see you next week. All right. Bye, guys.